The name of my work for the National is called A Metal Cry, which is actually quite short for me. Usually I make these kind of long titles. Big head, garbage face, guards, ghost, stir sonata, but this one's short. I just felt it was quite necessary to make something quite succinct. The origin of the work for the National was that the avant-garde for me, modernist avant-garde, is always a starting point. I mean, amongst other things, but it was that Fortunato da Pero, one of the Italian futurists, had made these amazing sketches of these costumes for an opera that never came to be. The costumes kind of had all these musical instruments attached. Some were like pipes and interesting conical hats and things, and I just was drawn to them. So I just made my own versions of them. So in the costumes that I made, some of them have got accordions in the armpits or in the crotch, or there's chimes. And so is that thing, do you move so you make sound, or do you just think about the shape that you're making and whatever the sound that's created from that movement is what the work is? And so I was kind of interested in which one comes first. Always, for me, there's always labour in the work and working. I had the idea that a man and a woman that are then like working on these structures. So there can be beauty, but there's always the labour there, and there's always the worker for me for some reason. Places that look very normal from the outside, there's all sorts of stuff going on behind you don't know about. And I think that's where I think the suburbs can be quite freaky in that way, and great. It's also that banality as well. So there's also the aesthetics. I love the aesthetics of the suburbs in Australia. I love it. Like actually a lot of those costumes, the idea was that for the first part of the fans, they're actually blinds that you'd put on your window, and I dye them and paint them. Actually, a lot of the time I use objects too that have had a prior life and no one wants them, and I kind of bring them back into a performance, and I try and give new life to those in the performance. So it's usually quite ritualistic or cathartic, my work in that way. And then just from that, like with all my work, there's this kind of broad net of other things that come into the work. I suppose at the time, you know, something kind of personal comes in where I was pregnant and about to have a baby, so maybe there was things that I was thinking about there, about birthing, and I usually won't tell people that, but I don't know, I'm telling you now. The way we were taught at art school was just that you could, I just allow things to come into the work and they feel right, and if they feel right and they won't go away, like if you go to bed at night and that idea won't, it's just persistent there and it keeps you up, then you must do it. I mean, that's the good thing about art too, is that you don't have to really worry too much. You just make the work and then see how, that's another reason why you keep making it. Because if sometimes it hasn't worked, or there's been something that's challenged people, you think, well, that's interesting, why has it challenged people? Is it because they're confused, or they like it, or they just don't agree with me? You know, I think that's good. There has to be some frisson there in the work, otherwise it's not doing its job, really.